Ahead and get started. All right. Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Christine, thank you for joining us. We would have hoped for a little bit of a better turnout, but nonetheless, we're recording this. And so we'll have the ability to make this available to anybody and everybody. It'll be at their disposal, and we'll communicate that out when we have it ready. So my name's Chris McCall. I'm the village manager, and welcome to the village's emergency preparedness forum, and to those joining us here. We've got a pretty big outline for this morning's forum and a lot of good information. But I want to start out with a few opening remarks. As we had recently worked with and attended the Project Longevity meeting last month with their focus on personal preparedness, I had let that group know that the village had also intended to host a similar event, although a bit more focused on what the village's role is in emergency preparedness, and with the primary focus on ensuring that our island residents and others are not in harm's way, not if, but when the next storm event happens and impacts the island. Today's forum is our opportunity to share a lot of good information, much of which, as you will see, is accessible at your fingertips through the village's emergency preparedness webpage on the village website, which we'll touch on in a little bit. But also today we have two important guests with us to set the stage with meteorologist Victoria Leva and Brunswick County Emergency Management's volunteer and nonprofit coordinator Leslie Stanley, who I've known for many years and has been a great asset at the county as a whole, including her coordination with the 19 municipalities in Brunswick County. I always point that fact out. Not many people realize how big Brunswick County is, and that Brunswick County has more municipalities in our county than any other county in the state. So we have a lot to coordinate with. I want to acknowledge that each year before the start of hurricane season, Brunswick County Emergency Services and Leslie hosts the annual hurricane conference at the Odell Williamson Auditorium, where local, county, state, and federal partners meet to hear from the National Weather Service the annual outlook, which Victoria will go over some of that information here shortly. But this annual gathering provides all of us who are responsible for ensuring the safety of all our residents the opportunity to continue to build on our partnerships, as more often than not, we may call upon each other for support. And as David McIntyre, Brunswick County Emergency Management Director and Leslie's boss, always emphasizes at those meetings, it's about collaboration, coordination, and communication. Today, my personal hope as the village manager, and recognizing that we have many new residents on the island, and maybe some who have never experienced a hurricane or have had to evacuate their residence, that we can offer information and how the village responds with pre-storm preparedness, storm response, and post-storm recovery, and that y'all leave with a better understanding and some level of confidence that the village is ready and capable with your all safety at the highest regard. And before we get started, I just want to acknowledge the well-capable staff of the village who are participating today, with several who have over 20 years of experience in dealing with natural hazard events throughout the years on Bald Head Island, and others with excellent experience working in the coastal environment. I can think of a number of events that stick out in my mind going back to Hurricane Charlie in 2004 and the winter nor'easter that wiped out a good stretch of South Bald Head Wind in front of the Bald Head Island Club, flooding from Hurricane Ophelia and Tropical Storm Tammy in 2005, which was sort of the impetus for a lot of the stormwater infrastructure improvements that are in place today that give us the capability to get that flood water off the island much quicker than back in those days. And then followed with Hurricane Irene in 2011, Joaquin in 2015, Matthew in 2016, Emily and Jose in 17, and then sure those that were here will not forget the extreme flooding of Hurricane Florence in 2018 with over 40 inches of rain in 72 hours, which required the first island-wide mandatory evacuation. And more recent events with Isaias in 2020, which included an F3 tornado that went across portions of Middle Island. And then our last event with PTC 8, yes, a potential tropical cyclone. So there'll be some emphasis on that, I'm sure, with with Victoria's comments as far as, not necessarily focusing on the category of the storm, but the cumulative impacts. And then other things that the village and our emergency operations team have to keep in mind in terms of, the timelines of doing an evacuation, whether that's voluntary or mandatory, and how we have to make certain decisions well in advance of our partners on the mainland side if we do have to evacuate, because we're on an island. So with all that said, I want to go ahead and turn it over. So thank you again for those that have showed up. So got a few more in the room, so thank you for attending. And I want to turn it over, Karen, I guess, to Victoria with the National Weather Service.
All right, good morning, everyone. Let me know, y'all can hear me, right?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so good morning. My name is Victoria Oliva. I'm a meteorologist with the National Weather Service here in Wilmington. I've been here for about 7 years now. So I'm just going to go ahead and talk about just hurricanes in general, a little overview of what happened last year across the Carolinas, and talk about, preparedness information, where you can go to get information throughout the hurricane season, and a quick look at the outlook for what we might expect for this year. So first off, just a quick look at who we are. So who is the National Weather Service? For those that don't know, the National Weather Service provides weather and hydraulic forecasts and warnings across the United States and all the territories, Guam, Pongo, Virgin Islands. And our mission is to protect life and property. That's why we do what we do. We have about 168 offices, and I won't go through all the stats, but there's a lot of forecasts and warnings, and everyone knows how much weather we get every year, from severe thunderstorms to hurricanes to flooding. And so that's what we're here for. Our office in Wilmington covers all of Southeast North Carolina, which includes Brunswick County, and Northeast South Carolina. And National Weather Service, it only costs everybody about $4 a year. Out of your taxes goes to National Weather Service. And a study found that from that $4, you get about $73 return for every dollar spent, just from what is saved because of, the warnings and forecasts from the National Weather Service. So, start off, I'll go through a little bit of what happened last year. So what we had 5 hurricane landfalls in the United States in 2024. Beryl, Debbie, Francine, Helene, and Milton. And in our area, Debbie did come up across South Carolina. It led to a lot of flooding in inland North Carolina. Bladen County, I think, got hit pretty hard. Helene, I'll talk about because you can't talk about 2024 without talking about Helene. And then Milton caused a lot of damage in Florida in October of last year. So this is a look at the fatalities that occurred, and you can see almost half is freshwater flooding. And this is common. I mean, I think about 2/3 of all hurricane fatalities historically are from water, whether it's freshwater flooding, storm surge, rip currents. Most fatalities from hurricanes come from water. And so last year there was over 100 freshwater flooding. I think most of that came from Helene, unfortunately. There were 79 wind fatalities, which was the most since 1963. And there was also 10 tornado fatalities. And then there were 14 storm surge fatalities in Florida. So quick look at Helene, because like I said, especially in the Carolinas, we can't talk about 2024 without looking at Helene. It made landfall in Florida. and then continued moving north across the Carolinas and led to catastrophic flooding in the Western Carolinas. So there are 174 fatalities from Helene, which was the most deaths due to tropical cyclones since Katrina in 2005, and the most freshwater flooding fatality since 1972. In the Eastern Carolinas, we had some rain and wind, but nothing compared to what the Western Carolinas felt. And the damage was estimated about $80 billion from Helene. So, as Chris had mentioned, obviously, especially given where we are, I can't not mention PTC8. That's something that we're going to be talking about for a bit. So, what exactly is a potential tropical cyclone? It's a terminology used by the Hurricane Center when a system has pretty much potential to bring tropical storm or hurricane force gusts and conditions to land, but it's not quite organized yet. And so if they call it a potential tropical cyclone, it allows them to put up warnings. So we had tropical storm warnings out along the coast because this system wasn't organized yet, but it had potential to. It never did organize. It stayed this disorganized system, but it brought gusty winds and obviously near historic flooding across Brunswick and New Hanover County. So PTC8, the main, center of it, did make landfall in South Carolina, even though most of the impacts were felt up here in North Carolina. For wind, again, we had like 50 to 70 mile an hour gusts across mostly, again, New Hanover and Brunswick County. And so that's where that potential tropical cyclone comes in. It's just a system that doesn't meet the definition of a tropical storm. Like, it doesn't have a concentrated low, but it could still cause impacts to the area. Radar loop, again, we all know the flooding that happened from PTC8, but this is, so you can kind of see the low making landfall near Myrtle Beach, but on the northeast side, you've just got those storms that kept going over the same area over and over and over again. So that's a picture of flooding east of Bolivia from Brunswick County Sheriff's Office. And I mean, this was common across, I think, eastern Brunswick and southern New Hanover. And this is why. So outside of the main low, you had these what we call mesolows that were migrating across the northeast and north side of PTC8. And that just kept training over and over and over again onto our coastline. So it was very disorganized. It never met the definition of tropical storm. And those training storms were very small scale. And forecasting that is extremely difficult ahead of time because it's impossible to line that up. I mean, if it would have moved, 10 miles north, then it would have been a completely different story, or 10 miles south. And so it was uncertain whether or not it would form, where it would go. And so it was definitely difficult from our point of view. And yeah, up until that morning. So rainfall, again, we had, I think 20 inches in Carolina Beach was the highest we got from PTC8, but there were measurements of 10 to 18 inches across eastern Brunswick and southern New Hanover. So widespread flooding, and we all know the impacts from this system, but I just needed to go over, kind of a little bit of finer details of what a potential tropical cyclone is. And again, that's why we had the warnings up, just to let people know that there might still be impacts, even if it's not a named storm. So this is just a quick look at something that we're exploring and we're going to be using more of to try to capture these high-end events. So again, we didn't forecast 20 inches of rain in Carolina Beach that morning or the day before, because it is so hard to capture that. So in the future, we're going to be relying a lot on probabilistic forecasts. And what that means is, while we'll have a set expect 2 to 3 inches of rain, there's going to be what we call a high-end amount, which means this is 10% chance that this would be exceeded is the scientific definition. It just means that you could see up to this amount. And so we'll be using this especially in terms of tropical. So in our briefings, which I'll get to later, you'll probably see a lot of this, especially this year, trying to highlight like how much rain could you possibly see. It'll probably be over forecasting most of the time, but we want to try to capture these, really, really high impact events. So we will be using probabilistic information in our briefings a hell of a lot more. So now I'm going to step back into, the basics of hurricanes and tropical cyclones. So when I say tropical cyclone is just, it's a catch-all term for any tropical system. Tropical storms, depressions, hurricanes, they're all tropical cyclones. So here's some terminologies that you'll hear from either in our forecast, from the Hurricane Center, from the media. A tropical wave is just an area of unsettled weather, like a cluster of thunderstorms. You'll hear a lot about, tropical waves moving off the coast of Africa. So this is what they're talking about, just this unorganized showers and thunderstorms moving west across the Atlantic. Tropical depression means that those storms are getting a little bit more organized, but it's still, the winds are less than 30 miles an hour. It's still kind of a mess. And then the tropical storm, you have a well-defined, like actual low pressure system, and everything's organized around that low. And you've got sustained winds of 38 to 73 miles an hour. So you notice like tropical storm goes up to 70 miles an hour, which means that just because it's a tropical storm doesn't mean it's not going to bring some pretty, and that's just sustained winds. You can still have gusts, 80, 90 miles an hour in a strong tropical storm. And this doesn't count rain, which I'll get to, like, just because, again, I'll emphasize this many, many times, like Chris said, just because it's a, tropical storm or just a Cat 1 hurricane, don't underestimate it. There could be, tornadoes, flooding. The winds don't translate to how impactful a storm can be. And then a hurricane is when that area of low pressure becomes extremely organized and you get the winds of 74 miles an hour or greater. So that's the definition of a hurricane. And that's when you get the nice eye and it just looks, well, kind of like, I think this picture is Florence. And you just got this well-organized system moving across the ocean. So for watches and warnings, watch will be issued whenever we expect tropical storm conditions or hurricane conditions, like if they're possible within the next 48 hours. And when I say tropical storm, I mean that, 40 to 70 mile an hour winds, and hurricane is 74 mile an hour plus. So when we issue a watch, it just means that conditions are possible in the next 48 hours. And a warning means that it's expected. And we will issue a warning when within 36 hours of tropical storm force winds occurring. So we might issue a warning, but the hurricane conditions won't come for another 2 days. And that's because as soon as tropical storm force winds happen, like as soon as you get those sustained winds of 40 mile an hour, it becomes increasingly difficult for you to prepare, for you to try to, shore up your house, for emergency personnel to be on the road. And so everything should be done before those tropical storm force winds arrive. And so that's what the warning is giving a heads up of, is that these winds are coming in the next 36 hours. So as I mentioned, wind is only one part of a tropical cyclone. There's many facets and many different hazards that it can bring. Storm surge, obviously, especially if the system's strong enough, you can get really devastating storm surge from a hurricane. High winds, inland rainfall flooding. Again, I think majority of hurricane fatalities come from inland flooding. So it's definitely something to keep in mind is, again, the flooding aspect of tropical cyclones. Tornadoes. Tornadoes don't depend on whether or not the storm is a tropical storm, a hurricane, a Cat 2 hurricane. There's different ingredients that go into tornado that are not tied to the actual system structure. So again, tornado potential doesn't translate to storm strength. And then you got river flooding, which lasts for a while after the storm moves out. And then rip currents and dangerous surf is another impact of tropical cyclones, especially for those that are off the coast. like if you have a storm that's a couple hundred miles away, it can still cause deadly rip currents at the coast, even if we're not experiencing any rain or wind from the storm. So that's something I always like to emphasize. A closer look at that inland rainfall flooding threat. All it takes is 6 inches of flowing water to push a car off the road. So next time you come up across a flooded roadway, if the water's moving, don't. Well, even if the water's not moving, because this second bullet right here, the road may be washed out. So this is a picture that was taken, this is kind of a before and after, taken by one of the meteorologists up in Newport, Morehead City office. And you can see like the road's quite flooded, but there is no road underneath it. And so with the water covering it, you don't know what the road condition is underneath it. Or maybe the road's there, but the weight of your vehicle just causes it to collapse. Every year we hear about a drowning from somebody that drove into a flooded road. So turn around, don't drown. I can't emphasize that enough. Don't drive through a flooded road. You don't know if the road's there. You don't know, like you could be pushed off the road. And it's not worth it. And even if you've got a big truck and you think, oh yeah, I'll be fine. Don't. There's been plenty of videos of tractor trailers getting pushed from, I think 12 inches of flowing water can push a truck off the road. And so this is a video, taken during Hurricane Floyd in 1999. And you can watch this little car just, that is very, very fast moving water. I'm not sure like why you would try to drive across it. And so I think a storm spotter took this video. Luckily the car does make it back to the road, so obviously we wouldn't show something that ends badly, but it's showing how powerful moving water is. And so in this case, it's definitely extreme. You can see how fast that water is moving, but any water over the road is not safe to drive through. So I think majority, over 50% of inland flooding deaths is from in a vehicle. So just have to emphasize that. So yes, while I do say don't focus on the category, I still have to at least mention the category. So hurricanes, as we know, goes from category 1 to category 5. And this GIF here is kind of a little bit of a artistic rendition of what like stronger category storms can do. You know, the stronger you are, the more damage you have, obviously, you know, trees, buildings. Unfortunately, we've all seen like aftermath pictures of Hurricane Michael in Florida Panhandle of just everything wiped clean. And so, yes, especially, you know, category 3, 4, 5, those major hurricanes definitely take the wind threat very seriously. But don't underestimate the category 1, 2, or tropical storms. So again, this scale is only for wind speed. It doesn't take into account anything else. So as we like saying, Hurricane Florence was only a category 1. And we'll remember Hurricane Florence for a very long time. But it was just a category 1. Storm surge. So this is just a kind of like a rendition of what drives storm surge. And literally what drives storm surge is the strong winds from a hurricane. The winds from the hurricane just kind of push water along the ocean until it reaches the coast. And storm surge is very sensitive to the storm's motion, direction, speed. And so while we'll forecast, the picture on the right shows a graphic that the Hurricane Center produces with storms. It kind of gives a little highlight of like the storm surge that you might expect along the coast. And this is above ground level. So this is during Hurricane Ian. You can see like 12 to 18 feet in Southwest Florida. But depending on where the storm makes landfall, it can vary a lot. So this is kind of like a worst case scenario. So if we're forecasting storm surge of 3 to 5 feet, if the storm shifts just a bit, you could see nothing. Maybe you get the offshore winds. And so we definitely try to forecast for the worst case scenario when it comes to storm surge, but it is highly dependent and it can change very quickly within, right before the storm's making landfall. So for those that have lived in the Carolinas for a long time, or hell, even just the last 10 years, we do have a very significant hurricane history. And that is because, hurricanes like coming across the Atlantic from Africa, from the Southern Caribbean, and we have what we call this Bermuda high pressure, which sits over the central Atlantic for most of the summer. And, tropical storms and hurricanes just travel around this high pressure. And these storms like to clip the Carolinas. Storms that travel all the way from Africa is what we call Cape Verde storms. And that's what Florence was. Florence took, I think, about 10 days to reach, to travel across the Atlantic before it hit here. So on average, Southeast North Carolina and Northeast South Carolina are impacted by tropical storm every 2 to 4 years and 6 to 8 years by hurricane. And when I say impacted, I mean pretty much like landfall and move directly over. That doesn't count for either storms that are offshore that cause deadly rip currents or inland storms that bring us some rain or tornadoes. So at least every year we have at least some impact from a tropical cyclone, even if it's just some rain and wind. But we do have a history with hurricanes. So for those who know, Steve Paff is the meteorologist in charge here, and he likes bringing, he doesn't like, but he emphasizes this point a lot, especially in the last couple of years. We are very overdue for a major hurricane. No one wants a major hurricane, but we are overdue. The last major hurricane to hit our area was Hurricane Fran in '96. So it's almost 30 years ago. And I think we're supposed to average a major hurricane every 17 years, just climatologically. And one of the biggest concerns is how much growth we've had in our area. I mean, we all know there's a lot of people moving to our coastal communities. We've had a lot of development up here in the Wilmington area. We've had a lot of new building structure, Leland area, you name it. We've had a lot going on in the last 30 years. And unfortunately, if we get a major hurricane in our area, that infrastructure is going to be put to the test. And another concern, which I'll also bring up again, is especially in this day and age of social media and the internet, there's a lot of misinformation. And you can all attest to that if you see someone storm mongering, what we call it, posting images of a giant hurricane is going to be coming here in another 2 weeks. There's just a lot of misinformation on the web when it comes to weather, and people just, I don't know, trying to scare folks or trying to get the jump on, being the first to warn on something, but know where to get your information from. But we haven't had a major hurricane in a long time, and so it'll happen. Hopefully later than sooner, but it'll happen. So I don't know if anyone was here. I mean, Hazel I think we just celebrated the 70-year anniversary of Hazel, but we do need to prepare beyond what we've experienced. Chris mentioned a lot of stuff that's happened in the last 20 years. Well, Hurricane Hazel is the benchmark for hurricane devastation in the Carolinas, or in North Carolina especially. So in 1954, it made landfall as a Category 4, I think near the state border. But we had 150-mile-an-hour winds. Storm surge, I think, was about 15 feet in parts of Brunswick County. Storm surge was as far inland as Lake Waccamaw. And it remained a strong hurricane up through central Carolinas. We also had about 10 inches of rain. We had a lot of devastating impacts from Hazel. And this is a quote from one of the newspapers that said, "All traces of civilization on the immediate waterfront between the state line and Cape Fear were practically annihilated." And that, again, this isn't something we ever want to experience again. But we have to at least remember that it is possible that another Hazel, again, Category 4, could impact our area. Some do's and don'ts to consider, especially going into the hurricane season. Don't wait until the peak of the season or a few days before a storm threatens to prepare. So peak of the season is late August into September. You don't want to wait till then. We have had storms in July, or you don't want to wait till like, oh, a storm's coming in a few days. Let's start preparing. You want to make a plan early. You want to get those supplies, get those supplies now while you can until, before the shelves disappear. Check your documents, your insurance, and just make sure that you're ready for if or when a storm heads your way, versus waiting to the last minute or waiting until August thinking that we won't have anything until then. Again, I'll emphasize this many times. Don't base your plan just on the winds. Base it on flooding, storm surge, tornadoes, how any of these might impact you. Like, have you had flooding before? Are you susceptible to storm surge, or do you have a plan for a tornado? All of this needs to be taken into account, not just strong winds from depending on the category of the storm. And that's a picture from the article that someone said that, yeah, Florence downgraded to category 1. Florence had enough impacts that it wasn't, it was just a category 1 is something. Don't return to the area just because the storm is weakened or downgraded. Especially, like, again, I'll bring up Florence. Florence was a category 3 about a few days before landfall, and then it slowed down and downgraded to category 1. So we did have quite a few people come back saying, oh, it's better. It's only category 1. And then next thing you know, like, they're stranded because Wilmington became an island, or, the house is flooded. Don't attempt to come back too early just because, you think it's safer before the storm even made landfall. And then after the storm makes landfall, make sure that, everything's cleared out. The roads are clear and you're allowed to return before coming back. Don't work alone to clean up debris after the storm. And don't ignore public health announcements. Depending on the storm, there could be plenty of announcements of water quality, things like that you definitely want to pay attention to. And take extra precautions after a storm to stay cool and hydrated, especially if we lose power. It gets pretty hot here in the summer. Try to avoid injury. I think we had 2 fatalities in Florence, or we had 1 fatality in Florence where a man fell off a ladder trying to clean up storm debris. And so you want to be careful while you're cleaning up after a storm, and properly ventilate generators. I'll bring that up again too, because every year there's a fatality from carbon monoxide poisoning from improperly used generators. And there's also a news article on the right of a man died after Florence from a bacterial infection because he walked through flooded waters. So definitely avoid floodwaters or wear proper gear if you've got to walk or work in floodwaters. And don't rely on unofficial social media sources for your decisions. Make sure you follow information from either National Weather Service, your town management, Brunswick Emergency Management, the media. Those are sources you want to follow. Don't just follow, don't just believe a random person that's sharing things on social media as what's going to happen. So follow the, credible sources. Some strengthening factors for hurricanes. What the Hurricane Center looks for in terms of whether or not a hurricane will strengthen is weak wind shear or loft. Stronger winds will just shear apart the circulation. Moving over deep warm water, which for us, we've got the Gulf Stream right off our coast, and ample moisture available. So this image is a picture of Hurricane Ian rapidly intensifying back in 2022. And you can just see that, picture perfect eye structure in the hurricane. Dissipation factors, if you got increasing wind shear aloft. So you can kind of see in this, I think this is Jerry in 2019, you can see the top of the storm just moving off to the northeast and leaving the low center behind. So that's a surefire way to just not kill a storm, but it'll weaken it pretty quickly. If the storm moves over cool water, or if it moves onto land or interacts with land. So one of the things why Florence weakened from a category 3 to 1 is it slowed down right next to our coast. So it started moving about 2 to 5 miles an hour. So spent a lot of time over the cool water between the Gulf Stream and North Carolina. And then dry air intrusions will also negatively impact a hurricane structure. Going back to the use caution after a storm, this is kind of a repeat of some of the stuff I'd mentioned, but it's always good to mention because you want to keep these in mind. If you evacuated, only return home when it's safe. Remain vigilant. Just because a storm's moved out doesn't mean that, there might still be flooding in the area. It might actually still be raining. You have down power lines, things like that. River flooding. Just because the storm's gone doesn't mean that it's all clear. Clean up safely, check on your neighbors, and only use generators outdoors. I will emphasize that because, again, just use generators outdoors. So I'm sure you've all seen this product before. Obviously, it's the go-to during hurricane season. So this is the Tropical Weather Outlook from the National Hurricane Center. And it gives you the probabilities of formation for the next 7 days. And when I say formation, I mean tropical storm or greater. So just based on this image, you could see yellow means, I think, less than 30%. Orange is 30 to 50 or 30 to 60. And then red is like 70 plus. Fiona, I think, is a hurricane here, and Gaston's a tropical storm. But regardless, it's a quick map of what storms are out there and where are possible development regions that we have to keep an eye on. And so this starts being issued May 15th every year. So it's been going on for almost a month now, even though hurricane season officially begins June 1st and ends November 30th. There have been hurricanes outside these times from June to November, but this is when most of the activity happens. And again, for us, the peak season is late August into September, but we've had plenty of, July, early August storms. So the forecast coming from the Hurricane Center, this shows up, if you're looking into the details for a specific storm, this will be shared a lot with the media from our page. Everyone shares the forecast going because it's a very useful, graphic, but there are some caveats to this as well. So what it is it shows where the center of the storm is most likely to travel. Not the storm itself, just the immediate center of the storm. So as you can see on this graphic, that the yellow-orange big circle around the storm, this is Hurricane Helene. That's how big the tropical storm force winds are. So that's how big the storm is. And you can see the cone is really small because that's just where the center is going to be. So you can imagine as the storm moves up here, the impacts are going to be quite far reaching. So every year we hear from somebody saying, oh, I'm outside the cone, I'll be fine. That's not how it works. This cone is only for the center. Impacts are felt well outside the cone, whether it's wind, flood, tornadoes. Do not focus on the cone. The cone will show you where the storm's traveling, but not what impacts you can feel for your area. So this map also shows you where tropical storm warnings are in effect, all the way up the South Carolina coast. And you can see the cone is well to the west. I mean, the storm isn't going to track anywhere near the coast of South Carolina, but there are tropical storm force winds expected in South Carolina. So that's the key with these graphics is don't focus on where the storm's going, focus on the impacts of the storm. And speaking of impacts, these are great graphics, and I'll show you where to get these as well. They'll also be in our briefings. But the hurricane threat impact graphics are created for wind, inland flooding, storm surge, and tornadoes. And what they are kind of graphics to convey what the potential threat level is. So it ranges from like minor, moderate, high, and extreme. And it kind of gives you a look of which threats might be the biggest threat for you. And it kind of gives it an idea for the decision makers what you could prepare for. So looking at these graphics, you might see that, the wind threat's fairly low, but maybe flooding rain threat's really high, or maybe storm surge is high. And this takes into account, latest forecast from the Hurricane Center, have a little bit of a margin on like either side to try to account for uncertainty. And each one kind of gives like a little bit of a blurb of what kind of impacts. You know, are you just going to have 40-mile-an-hour winds? Is flash flooding going to be common? Things like that. So these are great graphics to go to when it comes to preparing for a storm, not just that cone graphic. So again, these graphics will be in our briefings that we send out to our partners and are available on our web. But I'll also show you a website where you can access these graphics directly during a hurricane or during a tropical storm or hurricane. So where to get your information? Well, this first URL here, weather.gov/ILM/tropical, that's your go-to for the latest forecast information during the tropical season for our area. So that's where you'll get, if you go to the Hurricane Center's website, you'll also get their stuff's a national view. If you want that, like forecast for our area specific, like more localized, go to weather.gov/ILM/tropical. And from there, you have access to the Hurricane Center's graphics, the tropical weather outlook, the forecast cones, all that. But you can also access those threat graphics I was showing you. That's available on the Threats and Impacts tab. So you can zoom in and look at, what the threat is for, let's say, Bald Head Island. You can also look at the local products, like all the text products we're issuing from our area, any active warnings, flash flood watches, things like that. That'll all be here on this page. You can look at the current satellite, radar, our social media posts, and there's also links on here to local preparedness information. It's like readync.gov. We have our own local webpage for preparedness, weather.gov/ILM/hurricane prep. So in there has a lot of good information about like the different threats from a hurricane or tropical storm, what you can do to prepare, useful tips and climate facts, things like that. But if you're going to remember any URL, remember ILM/tropical. That's going to be a one-stop shop during the hurricane season for the latest weather forecast for any tropical systems. And I'd be remiss if I don't at least mention the hurricane season outlook. So as expected, it is forecasted to be above normal for this year. 60% chance above normal and 30% chance near normal. What goes into it? I think we're going to be in an end zone neutral. That's the El Nino Southern Oscillation. So we'll be in a neutral El Nino this year. Warm ocean and an active West African monsoon season. All that means there's a chance for an above normal active hurricane season. But as we emphasize every year, regardless of whatever the outlook says, is all it takes is one storm. And so, yes, it's good to know, like, is it going to be above normal, below normal? But if it's a below normal year, and let's say there's only one hurricane that entire year, but that hurricane strikes your town, you're not going to care that it was below normal. So regardless of whatever the outlook says, all it takes is that one storm. So you want to be prepared and you want to follow the forecast to keep an eye out if there's anything you need to take action for. So yes, it's above normal, but all it takes is one storm, regardless of whatever the prediction is from either NOAA or Colorado State or anyone out there that's putting out an outlook. And I breezed through that faster than I thought, but here's my email address. If anyone wants to have any questions, shoot me an email. I can also take any questions now if anyone has any. I can also share these slides if needed.
All right. Thank you, Victoria. If anybody has a question or two they might like to pose to Victoria, if not, we'll move on to the next speaker. Again, Leslie Stanley with Brunswick County Emergency Services. Leslie.
Thank you, Chris. Hey, everybody. So the good thing about these small internet groups is we can more chat versus me talking to you. How many here live here full time? Almost everybody. Vacationers or visiting? Work here. Okay, great. So this information is applicable to everybody. The talk is going to be a little bit different than, my preparedness speeches usually are, because we're not going to focus on what to do if a hurricane comes. Because if a hurricane comes, if it's expected to impact this area, we want you to leave. Just that simple. If evacuation order is issued by the town, you need to go. How many of y'all have somewhere that you know you would go, whether it's another home, family, friends? Good. So when you're making your plan, your preparedness plan, there's a couple things to do. Sometimes things happen that we don't see coming so much, like the PTCA. That was a great flood that impacted us significantly. We didn't really see that coming. That wasn't expected. Tornadoes, obviously, those are unexpected threats. We have a little bit of warning, but not like hurricanes. So you do want to have an emergency plan. You do want to have the items at your home ready to go in case we have a power outage. And that would be, we all know the flashlight, the batteries, the weather radios. Not candles. We do ask that people not use candles if there's a power outage. Back in the day, I know when I was growing up, the message was, gather the candles, and everybody's going around gathering those little, I don't know what you call them, candles you stick in the candle holders, the tall ones. No candles, please. They pose a fire hazard when you're moving about in a frantic, if there's an emergency, or if your pets get anxious, those candles can easily get knocked over. Now you've got a whole nother problem you didn't even want to deal with. So no candles, stick to the flashlights. The weather radios, do be sure that you monitor the trusted sites. You're going to hear me say a lot of things that Victoria talked about, but we can't stress this enough. You got to monitor the trusted sites. Social media can be lots of fun, but there's a lot of misinformation on there. So you're going to want to see what the village is telling you. You're going to want to see what the county is telling you through the emergency management website. You're going to want to, for y'all, it would be more for, general information that's not really applicable here on the island, but the sheriff's office with the county has an amazing app that they will keep you up to date on what is going on over there on the mainland with road closures and things such as that. So follow them. National Weather Service, obviously the Weather Channel, and our two main local news channels, WCT, WWAY, have multiple ways to get alerts, not just one. The county has a program called Ready Brunswick. We do weather alerts. Bobhead, do y'all have your own alert? Y'all do Code Red or Code Red? Yeah. So, have multiple trusted ways to get your alerts. You don't want to depend on just one because it is technology. So have multiple ways to get those alerts. The information for the county alert system is out there on the flyer. Pick it up, take it with you, sign up. It's on the county website, super easy. And through our site, you can manage the alerts you want. You might want alerts about high wind. You might want thunderstorms. You may not, and that's fine. You get to select. There's more choices than you could possibly imagine. Customize it for your needs and your wants. So you're going to make your plan, not just for you, but for your pets if you have them. Something good to do ahead of time is to go around your home, your businesses, take photos. Oftentimes we don't think to do that. We know what's in our home. Our insurance companies do not. So you want to take photos in case you experience a flood while you're off the island. You want to have that so you can, document that for your insurance company. Know where those documentations are. When you leave the island, take them with you. We keep at our home, we keep ours in a fireproof, waterproof safe that we can carry with us. I recommend you do the same. Your passports, any of those important documentations, you don't want to be looking for them during, it's time to pack up and go. Have all those things in one place, grab it and go. When an evacuation order is issued, go then. A lot of people have seen the news in Katrina. Katrina is a perfect example of evacuation chaos. We see the vehicles stranded on the roads. I'm sure ferry systems can get crowded. If you go when you're asked to go, there's less traffic to deal with, less headache at the gas pumps because you're going to have to go there too. You're going to want to be ready and move out peacefully and just take a break from your home or from your vacation or from your job and it will be okay, because there's nothing more important than your life safety. Whatever goes on with our homes, it is all replaceable. If you stay here on the island, if you stay on the mainland, like my family and I live in Southport, we often talk about mandatory and voluntary evacuations, and everybody's like, well, what's the difference? As far as I understand it, on Bald Head Island, a voluntary evacuation is guests, visitors, they must go. Rentals, you're going. Mandatory evacuation, people always call us and say, well, you can't make us leave. It's my home. You're exactly right. We cannot. As far as I understand it, that's the same for Bald Head. But what happens when you don't leave during a mandatory evacuation? You are assuming all responsibility for yourself. Most likely there will be power outage. There will be water failure. Public safety may not be available. There are times on the mainland, if the wind speeds get high enough, our ambulances and our fire trucks have to come off the road. If you have a medical emergency, that just delays the response to you. And we don't want that for anybody. And I'm sure you don't want that for yourself. So it's very important. If there's a mandatory evacuation, even if there's a voluntary evacuation, just go ahead and pack up a bag and head out of town for a little while. Very good point was, if the storm changes, as they typically do, like Florence went from a high category down to 1, and people did come back, but what they came back to was major flooding. She talked about how, I guess, Wilmington was an island, Brunswick County, not talking about our beautiful islands, but the county itself, the mainland, was 3 major islands. That's not little islands. The county was 3 major islands. They're at the government complex where we go during the storm. If any of y'all are familiar with the government complex in Bolivia, you may or may not be. We were isolated there for almost 2 weeks. Resources were having to be flown in. It's a challenge. We don't want that for y'all. We don't want it for you here. We don't want it for you on the mainland. So please do leave. If the storm changes, wait until your local officials say it's good to come back, but they feel confident with you coming back. And these gentlemen, their team, they'll keep you up to date. They'll keep you up to date through their website and through whatever alert systems y'all have. So wait for their advice and guidance. You don't want to come back to power outages. I know with Florence, a lot of people who were trying to get back were anxious, as we all would be. What does my home look like? I want to get back to my comfort, or, it could be expensive. I've been on vacation long enough now and I need to go home. With Florence, I took many phone calls of, I'm ready to go. How can I get back? Well, it was taking a lot of people a 3-hour trip, 8+ hours to get back because of the flooded roads. But more than that, you're coming back to no power and no water. I don't know if any of y'all have experienced that in the summer. That's misery. That is no fun. You thought vacation was getting a little old after a few days. Coming home to no power and no water is tough. Don't want to do that. But also, let's think about, if you stay here, Bald Head has a wonderful tradition of not cutting down the beautiful trees. Those trees fall, you're not going to even be able to go anywhere, because these gentlemen aren't going to be here to clear cut those roads for you. On the mainland, it takes fire departments and our volunteer groups quite a while to get out and clear the roads from fallen trees. So that's another reason you don't want to stay here. If they say go, if they ask you to go, please do go. Let's see, I'm going to review my notes real quick. So during the storm, we're not going to be here for a hurricane. We all agree we're leaving. Unexpected things, have your know your safe space in your room, in your house, center of the house, no windows. If you're on the top floor, get down. I think we all pretty much know that. Cover your head. If a tornado's coming, if a warning's coming, cover your head. If you've got a bike helmet, put it on. Nobody's going to care what you look like. Wear that thing in your safe place. If you don't have a bike helmet, hold pillows over your head. It matters. It helps. We want to protect our sensitive brains. Continue to always monitor the trusted sources before, during, and after. Again, this group will keep y'all informed. The county will keep you informed. Then local news will keep you informed. So monitor those sites. I cannot stress that enough. Weather Service talked about the category of a storm. Yes, it does not matter. Does not matter one bit. PTC8, a flood, not wind. Florence, a flood, not wind. The winds, when they do get bad, you're gonna have that. So you're gonna have the down trees, you're gonna have, roofs missing shingles or holes or, trees on homes, things like that, compounded by the floods. So be real mindful that you don't just look at that category. There are so many more impacts. You've got the flooding, you've got the storm surge. I don't know if y'all were listening. She said 12, 15-foot storm surge, and that's land level. I mean, I don't think any of us in here are 12 or 15 feet tall. That's stack yourselves up 3 times. That's how high the water comes standing on the ground, but nobody can survive that. So your safety is most important. So keep these things in mind. You want to be sure you go when you're asked to go and come back when you're told it's safe to do so. I cannot stress that enough. When you come back and you find that your home has some damage, if it does, and you may not, you may be blessed and there's nothing wrong with that. It happens like that often. But if you find you have damage, you're going to take more photos. Take more photos and call your insurance company and report that before you start doing work. Y'all are a little bit different over here. On the mainland, we have a lot of great nonprofits and volunteer groups that help people with their unmet needs. They might not be able to put a tarp on their roof. They might not be able to clear the debris out of their driveway so that they can come back and forth. I don't know that that's going to be a need here, but if you find that it is, let your village know. You can let me know. That's one of my jobs as the volunteer and nonprofit coordinator, is I connect our citizens to the resources that can help them. If they don't have the means or the ability to do so, we will help you. The county has an access and functional needs registry. Again, y'all are a little bit different over here in that this may not so much apply to you, but the way that the registry works, if people in our county are on the registry, access and functional needs means that they have a medical need. It could be they're on oxygen, it could be they're bedridden, it could be they're handicapped, it could be they can't afford to evacuate if an order is issued. They may not have the gas money, they may not have a vehicle. Well, we're going to help with that. Again, I don't really know that applies to you, but you know people on the mainland. So if you know somebody who needs this assistance or needs the service, have them go onto the county website and register for the Access and Functional Needs Program. We want to help them. We don't want anybody to feel like they are left alone in a storm. Not before, not during, not after. We are all here as a team, the county, our municipalities, we're all going to work together to take care of our citizens. The turnaround, don't drown, that's so true. We experienced this in our county. You may or may not hear about it on the news pretty much every season. With PTCA, we lost at least 1, but maybe 2 people to the floods. It's real. 6 inches is not a lot of water. It can wash a car off the road, but imagine what it can do to a golf cart. I don't know. We have a golf cart. We live in Southport, but if we have a deep puddle, I'm not driving through it, and I advise y'all not to do the same around here. But as she spoke to, we don't know what's under that puddle, especially here. Under our roads, it's sand. It's not compacted dirt, it's sand. That washes out real easy. So you want to be sure that you keep that in mind on flooded roads around here. Be very cautious and careful riding your golf carts around, because that is a true hazard. Power outages report. Who's your power company over here?
Duke.
Okay. Duke has a wonderful website. If you leave and you want to know, do I have power at my home? Go to their website. It will show you. It will show you if you have power at your home. It's a great resource. Oftentimes we have a flood of calls in the EOC, the county EOC, which stands for Emergency Operations Center. We get a flood of calls. Do I have power at my home? The Duke Energy website will tell you. They are super great for that. They keep it up to date. It's real information in live time. So monitor that. Things you want to do when you leave the island. You want to be sure you stop and get cash. Power outages, can't use the debit cards and credit cards that we've all become so dependent on. Take your medicines with you. Fill your prescriptions ahead of time. These are things we don't tend to think about, but you don't want to be stuck in an emergency without, those needs. If you are power dependent, if you have a CPAP machine or anything like that, those are good reasons to think, I probably don't want to stay if we have a power outage. We don't know how long power is going to get restored. It could be hours, it could be days. So everybody's needs are different. Know what your needs are, know what you are capable of working through. And if a power outage for a few hours isn't for you, then go on and head off for the island for a few days. Like I said, though, the county is always here to help in any way we can, as is your administration, I'm sure. Shelters, we do open shelters when we issue a voluntary or mandatory evacuation. I don't know that anybody over here would need a shelter, but they do exist. We have 3 schools that are our primary shelters, and they are all pet friendly, dogs and cats only. And that's for if people, again, are power dependent. We don't want people even to come to our shelter. Truthfully, if we issue an order, those shelters are for people who can't go, who can't leave the area. But to help those people, we're going to open a shelter so that they can have the power and that they can have food and that they can have that safety. But the critical message is, if you can leave, do leave. And a lot of people ask, well, where do I go? Which way do I go? How many of y'all have a home or a vacation home elsewhere, or family and friends just way out of the area? Good. So a lot of times, most often, people in this area, they might head towards the Charlotte area. Obviously not north, not south, if it's coming up the coast. If you head south, you're heading right into it. If you head north, that's follow you. So generally, westward into the county is good. Now, we all know Hurricane Helene devastated the western part of North Carolina, but that wasn't our storm. We wouldn't be leaving for that anyway. Every storm is different. Watch them, pay attention, know what the projection is, and then head out of its way before it gets here. Know what your plan is going to be before the time comes. You don't want to have to be worrying with that. If it's to go to a hotel, if you have a dog or a cat, call them ahead of time. Y'all accept a dog and a cat. Know these things before it's time to go. You don't want to be worrying with those small details at the last minute. Anything else?
I think that's good, Leslie. Thank
Okay.
you. Yeah. Yeah.
When I do this on the mainland, there's a lot of other little tips, but again, they don't so much apply. Y'all, and your village is going to keep you very up to date on what to do and when to do it and when to come back. Essentially what we do on the mainland for our residents over there. But if y'all have any questions, yes.
I am a little concerned of flooding over here, but I'm really concerned about flooding over there.
Yeah, it's a real thing.
Okay. And being able to get out. I mean, once we take the ferry and we're there, and then having roads not flooded over there. So how do we know what the condition of the roads over there?
So that would be the sheriff's office is the best app to keep up to date with roads. The state has a site, it's 511.
Okay.
You can call that anywhere in the state of North Carolina. You can enter the county and it's going to tell you the road closures. Now that works great for, like right now, Highway 133 is closed in Brunswick County for repairs. They know that it's on there. But see, in a storm, it's so fast. You know, this road's closing here, that road's closing there, and it's so quick that the state really can't keep up with that. So the sheriff's office, because their patrolmen are all over the road, they know in real time, and they're putting it on their app. You know, oh, this road's closed. Oh, this road's getting ready to be closed. So the sheriff's office is a phenomenal local source.
And that is by county.
Brunswick County. Yes. Sir.
Also, to tie into that and to answer your question is, we try to be forward thinking enough that when we issue those evacuations, that's gonna be before there's flooding in the roads.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, so if we say it's time to go, that means that if you leave then, you should be clear to get out.
Okay.
Generally, evacuation orders are issued 3 to 5 days ahead of impacts. So that's why we say when you're asked to go or told to go, that's why you go then.
Okay.
So you're gone before the impacts get here.
Okay. Okay.
But now if we get caught off guard, like PTC 8, with that unexpected flood, the sheriff's office will be a great resource to see what roads are flooded. But yeah, they'll be issuing their orders over here 3 to 5 days ahead of time
Okay,
with a hurricane.
thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Is there some place we can go to for regional information, like if we have to go from Brunswick to New Hanover? And so I see Josh trying to say, likely we're just going to Brunswick and staying.
So I will say that the popularity, what she's talking about with the Brunswick County Sheriff's Office app, New Hanover has the same thing. It's it's actually an app that my former sheriff that I worked under, that was here in Brunswick County, he is one of the, members of that organization that makes the app. It's called the police app or the sheriff's app, depending on which side you're on. It's it's getting very popular where almost every department has it. I will.
And we always get that call, if we have an evacuation, y'all are gonna hear Florence just so much when people talk about storms, because it was our most impactful event. And the call center of the county was just flooded with people who had gone to Charlotte or Raleigh, and how do I get back? Well, I'm traveling through this county, this county, this county. Well, we don't know that. Sitting in Brunswick County, we're lasered in focused on Brunswick County.
And that's when the highway patrol.
That's when the highway patrol can be a help, but a great recommendation. Again, this comes to the pre-planning. Know where your route will be and go ahead and get those apps on your phone to monitor those local sheriff's office.
They do a great job. Those apps do a great job. I mean, to the point that there's been days where all of us do a normal daily commute where I've texted those and like, hey, it just came over on the sheriff's office app that they got Highway 17 northbound closed at such and such for a wreck. Like they keep it up to date.
Yeah, and that is the very best source. And I don't know if any of y'all are familiar with I think it's pronounced Waze.
Yeah.
So what we found with one of our storms, Waze is real people like us. As we're driving along, oh, we see something, put it in the app that this road's passable. We had a lot of roads that were flooded, but because the information is not by officials, so maybe people not making the best judgment calls. Oh, I just drove through this road, it's open. So they were, marking it as open. And it wasn't safe. So I really don't recommend that you use that app. Let it be a public safety official. Monitor them. Anything else?
All right. Well, thank you again, Leslie. I know Leslie did talk a lot about personal preparedness and Gail, just want to acknowledge with the group I had in my initial remarks that the Project Longevity folks had their event and did focus a lot on personal preparedness. So we've been going for an hour, a little over an hour. I promise we'll try to get this wrapped up. The more probably to you all, the more important part of this forum is specific to the village and what we do and how we do it when we respond to an event. And so we've got a series of slides we're going to go through. We're going to sort of take a tag team approach amongst staff with respect to a variety of subjects. And then at the end, we wanted to leave a little bit of time for a question and answer, but we'll try to get through this in timely effort. And so the first part of the presentation, Chief Gibson, Josh here is going to talk a little bit about, well, not so much about the personal preparation, but the village's preparation.
Yes.
So go ahead, Josh.
So the first couple of slides are about personal preparation, and like Village Manager McCall said, we're just gonna kind of skim over those two and get to the village preparation. Leslie has done a great job today talking about that. Again, Project Longevity has done a great job doing that. So we'll go right here to village preparations. So the village has a emergency management plan that is updated yearly. And in that emergency management plan, it breaks it down into alert levels for the village. And that's a tiered system from alert level 1 to alert level 4. It also, inside that emergency management plan, has specific checklist tasks for each village department to get done during those alert levels so that we are prepared when it does make landfall and the storm is here. And this is a quick little alert level one. When we enter alert level one, we start doing the checklist for that. That's 72 hours out. 2, 48 hours out, 3, 24 hours out, and alert level 4 is our final one. And that's 12 hours out, and that's when we're making those final preparations. We do open up a EOC, and open that up anywhere in those levels. And our EOC is even a staggered EOC, so there's different levels of EOC. We can have a basic EOC where it's just a table in here with the village manager, myself, the mayor, or as for larger scale incidents or hurricanes, it can be a full-blown EOC in here where we have department heads and whole council. There's room for everybody in here, and everybody has an assigned area. We gather and we make the decisions. As part of that EOC, the public safety chief is the incident command for the event. And when I say that, that doesn't mean that I make all the decisions, because I don't want that. It just means that the incident command for the EOC gathers all the information. So we're the incident commanders in direct communication with the village manager, or the village manager, the mayor. All that information is coming in, the decision's made, then he's responsible for gathering all the information and making sure we keep a record of it and putting that information out through the PIO.
Yeah, I would add typically in an event, the EOC would be activated somewhere between the alert level 2 and alert level 3 timeframe in our emergency management plan. And again, that would be based on, the event as it is unfolding, right? It's a moving target. And so, and that would be in consultation as part of the EOC team. The mayor and village council are part of the EOC team as the elected officials, because there are certain decisions that the elected officials will be responsible to make with staff and the EOC team's guidance and direction and feedback on what we're hearing and seeing.
And for those of you who may not know this, the EOC, the Emergency Operations Center, you're in it right now.
Yeah.
It's what this room becomes. And if it gets to a point where we issue that mandatory evacuation and we have to leave the island as well, then we have a off-island EOC arrangement. So we'll just move everything from here over to the mainland, and we'll still be operating, monitoring situation, and getting back over here as soon as we can.
All right, Karen.
Okay, I'm sitting over here because I've got all the control. So like Leslie said, the county has a notification system that sends text, phone, and emails. We have one, it's called Code Red. I'll show you in a moment where you can sign up for that on the website. And you should already be signed up for the Village's Voice announcements and e-newsletter. I'll show you where to sign up for that as well. I'll give you a short tour of the website in just a moment. And of course, all our social media can be found on linktree.com/villagevhr. So if you give me a moment, I'm going to pull up our webpage. Okay. So if we have an emergency event, the homepage banner up at the top here is going to be red, as are the boxes here for our announcements that we're blasting out to you. Okay. Also, if we're having an event, I've been using this little thing here for like timely topics. And this will change to severe weather. So you can click on that too, okay? I'll show you what's on that page in just a sec. But if you go to residents and owners, the sign up for Code Red is here. And then the Village's Voice is here. Then we have emergency preparedness. And this is also on the home page too, down here, emergency preparedness. So I'm going to click on that. Everything that we've said today is pretty much on this webpage. The code red sign up. What we skipped over and a lot of the things that Leslie just told you are here, what to do before, during, and after a hurricane. We'll be going over our pre and post storm decision making. All that information is here. Stephen will speak briefly about our flood protection. That's here. Outage information is here on how to contact Duke. And I'm going to correct something that Leslie said that I've been told by Duke. The outage information on the outage map is populated by phone calls from property and from their customers. It is not alive on what would be on the island. If we evacuate, it will not show that we don't have power here. We are going to have to make that assessment and let you know what we think as far as what the power situation is on the island. That map is not going to be used for you. You may look at the mainland and see if Southport's out, because Southport will probably have a population on there, still there, living there, if they didn't evacuate, depending on the severity of the storm. So if the mainland's out, we are likely out, but it's not going to show on that map until we start coming over.
Yeah, Karen, to add to that, so you're aware that the village has a good relationship with Duke Energy and their government relations folks, including Pam Hardy. So she has my number, I have hers, she has Josh's too, but we have that connection that if there's a question about that, I'm either calling her or she's already called me to let me know what's going on, so.
Okay. Water and sewer, this will take you to our utilities webpage where I will put notices. So if you, for instance, during PTC8, if you were one of the folks that were flooded and we had your grinder pump turned off, all that information was posted on that webpage. This is the regional plan for hazard mitigation. If you're interested in knowing some of the prep we do as a region for emergencies, it's on there. And all these other resources have been mentioned today. And we'll mention some of these later as far as the scams and contractors. So this is the severe weather page that you would see up here on the home page. I've already posted a bunch of stuff on this page, okay? So you can sign up for Code Red here. And that tropical outlook page that Victoria was talking about, that link to that's right here. You can see there's not much stuff out there, but if we had stuff out there, we'd be looking at we start looking at stuff way in advance. So we'd be sharing stuff with you. But if you're curious, you can go there. There's tons of links here. So I've already repeated some of them, but our social media channels. If we have road conditions with PTC8 and we send our guys out to monitor the road conditions, I will have some of that. I made a Google map of the road conditions during the storm. And those would be all in my announcements. Transportation, barge, that Brunswick County Sheriff's Office page that Leslie was talking about, the links there. The DOT's road condition map. And try to localize it, but if you're on a main highway, it's likely they'll be keeping up with that. And then the Brunswick County road conditions, this is the one that the county puts out in their GIS. All right, I think I gave you enough of a tour, so I'm gonna go back to our slides. All right, so I'm gonna sit up here, we can talk. So usually Code Red is used to send something to you if you need to do something. All right, I'll probably already be sending out announcements through the Village's Voice, but if you need to start tying down your furniture and the high winds are coming, I'm sending out a Code Red because we want you to do that. We want you to start batting down the hatches and getting ready for a storm coming. So we'll be sending out announcements regularly Usually it's AM or PM. They coincide with the National Weather Service's briefings. But again, that severe weather webpage that I had with all those links, I'm going to be updating that page constantly as I receive information from public safety and the utilities, kind of building up what I'm going to blast out to everybody eventually. So if you want to keep up with what's going on moment to moment, that severe weather webpage is the place to go. And I know how important it is for you guys to know what's going on over here. Public safety, if they're here, they're really good about showing me what the conditions are in live time, and I'm posting those on our social media. We know that you want to know what it's like over here, and if we ask you to leave, we know you're concerned about your property. So we're going to try to give that to you visually as best as we can. All right.
Okay, thank you, Karen. So I wanted to touch upon the pre-storm decision-making as the storm is making its way towards us. And you've heard already about the timeframes at which we start putting information out. But specific to evacuations and a voluntary or mandatory evacuation, Leslie already mentioned about for Bald Head, the nuances of being on a barrier island and the fact that we have to make decisions much sooner than our mainland counterparts because we have to also coordinate with Bald Head Island Transportation and the ferries, right? And I would say historically throughout all these events over the ones that I've been involved with, the Bald Head Island Transportation has been an excellent partner in working with and as part of our ESC team to get folks off the island. But we do it in a phased approach, meaning with the voluntary evacuation, it is mandatory for renters and vacationers if you're not an island resident, right? So that we can so if we have to make the transition to a full mandatory evacuation like we did with Florence, we have a good, say, 70 to 80% of the bodies off the island already. So it's not as difficult to work through to get everybody off the island. We've done it before. But by the time we get to that point, we've already issued a state of emergency. I would say the decisions that are involved in those state of emergencies, when we give an evacuation order, they're not, they can be difficult decisions because we know how that's going to affect or impact property owners and businesses and the island as a whole. And so I would say historically, in my experiences working with the council as the elected officials, when we've had to make those kinds of decisions, it's been with a great deal of heaviness. But the priority, right, is everybody's safety. It's the top of the priority when those kinds of decisions are made. So, but the other part I want to mention about that pre-storm and decision-making process is that Bald Head Island Transportation running a public transportation system on the Cape Fear River is accountable to the Wilmington U.S. Coast Guard Sector Command. And they make decisions of closing the river in advance of the storm. And based on that decision, we have to react to Bald Head Island Transportation. And there's conditions they call conditions X-ray to Zulu. By the time you get to Zulu, that's a full closure of the river. And Bald Head Island Transportation cannot run the ferries. So we have to take that into consideration as well. The next slide, as part of our decision-making internally, we have through FEMA, the HurryVac storm planning software. And this is just an example of the system that I'm using daily as the storm evolves. In this particular one, you can see down at the bottom, that's on a Monday. It forecasts and track hourly through Tuesday, Wednesday, and this is updated. This one was the Tropical Storm Idalia on Monday, August 28th, 8 a.m. Advisory. So I use this information and I put together, along with the National Weather Service, briefings, updates that I provide to the mayor and council as the storm evolves, and making decisions to enter alert levels and throw on out the event. Next slide. This slide is just a screenshot of what is called Web EOC. This is ran through Brunswick County, and it helps us and other local municipalities with the county if there's any assets, personnel, equipment that we feel we may need throughout the event. And we'll log everything through this system, from the initial pre-storm actions, the initiation of our state of emergency, through the post-storm response and recovery. As an example, with Florence, we worked through the county and through the state of North Carolina, where we brought in the North Carolina Army National Guard to help with our recovery efforts after Florence. Next slide. All right. See here. So again, pre-storm. Yeah, just our actions we talked about, and coordination with transportation as the storm approaches. So at this point, I'm gonna turn it over to Josh to take us through during the storm. Josh?
All right, so once the storm starts arriving, the weather starts arriving, it's important to keep up to date with the information that our PIO, Karen, is sending out, as well as be knowledgeable of if there is a state of emergency. And if there is a state of emergency, what is included in that state of emergency? And again, that will be posted out as well. Anytime there's a state of emergency, it's posted out on our website, I believe, and Karen posted it in other places as well. Because with a state of emergency, there's also sometimes conditions put into that state of emergency, such as curfews, alcohol sales. And so if there are conditions put into the state of emergency, such as a curfew, public safety is then bound to enforce those conditions. It is a class 3 misdemeanor for a violation of a state of emergency condition. So just keep up to date with those. We have enough going on during the storm that we don't need to be trying to have to deal with making sure everybody's doing what they're supposed to do. But then it hits again a little bit as far as that goes back to that personal preparation. Make sure you have your kit. You can fill up bathtubs with water. Again, that's not for drinking. That is just for if you need it to dump into your toilet to be able to flush it, and things like that. We had already put this on there. The flood waters here are not just bacteria-based dangers. There's also animals in those waters that you can't see, including little baby alligators sometimes. And so please don't walk through floodwaters. We had a little bit of that during PCC 8 where we saw some bicycles trying to make it through the flooded areas and stuff. It's really dangerous. Victoria even posted something about where somebody died from the bacteria infection from that. Generators, make sure they're outside of your garage. Again, that goes back to, we got a lot going on during the storm. Adding a structure fire is not at the top of our want list during that. So make sure if you do have a generator at your house, it is being ran outside. Make sure you have it serviced yearly. Because the last thing we need is for you to try to run it and it's not running right, but you're going to want it anyway and causes more issues. And avoid using your phone. That's just for battery life. Is why that's there. Conserve as much battery as you can before we lose power. And then obviously you're going to be conserving as much as you can if you go to generator power, because you don't know how long your generator is going to last. But yeah, and it's very important to have a communications plan. That means it's not a communications plan with us. That's a communication plan with your family. So make sure you have something set up where, hey, if you don't hear from me in 12 hours, there's something wrong. I'm gonna try to get a hold of you in the next 12 hours. So have that in place with who you're gonna contact. Yes.
An overriding question I've had kind of since we've been talking about all this is if we lose power and internet, how are we gonna communicate?
So if you lose power, cell service still should pick up from,
Well, that, maybe,
yeah,
the biggest problem they had in the mountains was that.
right. So
And I think the state issued some sort of order to use special phones. I'm just wondering if we are geared into that from not just y'all communicating, but communicating with us.
yes, so cell phones, if we lose power to the island, the Southport Tower, you still can't hit off Southport Tower. Southport,
We can't even get off this tower a lot of
Right,
times.
that's-
Yeah.
so what I've learned about cell phone towers, the closer you are is not a good thing. As far as signal, because they actually were talking about putting one in my neighborhood and people were excited until they realized that if you're directly around it, it doesn't do anything for you. So cell phones would be the main thing. Nobody really has landlines and that would take electricity anyway.
But if they are not, I mean,
Yeah, so.
satellite phones or what are we?
So satellite phones are very expensive. You can buy one if you want to. We have, I don't know where David is. I think we have two for the village and they are reserved just for emergency communications with Brunswick County EOC. And even those we don't keep active all the time. We activate those whenever we have a storm coming up, just because they,
If we lose power and internet.
So I
yes.
think if it's gonna be an extended power outage, y'all would pretty much be.
Hopefully you would be gone, yeah.
Sorry, what you saying?
If the impact of the extended power outage is expected, that goes back to y'all should not be here.
But somewhere,
Do what?
we are still trying to communicate from wherever we are.
Sure, but they wouldn't be here, right? So
No,
where
not
they,
during-
they would have power. So wherever you've evacuated to, you would have power, and where they are working from remotely.
So for example, like when we get caught here, not just in a hurricane, like a flood, like we did last September. And if we lose, which in years past, we have lost power and all internet capability. That's what I'm talking about, and we're here.
Are those, now on the mainland, are unexpected, as she's talking about, it's never extended power outages, is it extended for y'all?
It's usually not anymore. They've done extensive work on our grid here on the island. They have zoned it off where they can, if there is something going on, they can make it to a small area, so then people can go from that area to that area if they need to use power.
We just have to wait till it's fixed.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, the Starlink system is not a system intended for the general public.
Remember Claude mentioned that?
Yeah, well, Claude and I, we need to have a sidebar conversation on that because I've always, but yeah, I mean,
And, or communicate back and forth.
So ultimately, if there's a safety issue and we're out of power and there's people on the island, it's gonna resort back to the old days for us, and that's, we don't need power or electricity to run the trucks with a PA system.
We just need to communicate to tell you we need help.
Yep, so we would be going around and we're still gonna patrol. That's like she was saying with the whole road closures and everything, how the sheriff's office still has patrolmen out there. We're bound to protect this island. If we're on this island, we're still patrolling. If we're still on island, there's never gonna be a time that we can't respond to you or are out and about checking on conditions, and so we're always out and about.
High water vehicles that.
We have pickup trucks that we use, and typically they do well for us, and if not, they at least get us through the storm. Sometimes we have to replace them after the storm, but they at least get us through the storm.
and then again, we have the capability to request, like we did with the National Guard, like with Florence, to get high water vehicles over
type thing, getting caught here unawares, is the,
But,
we can get away with a hurricane.
I use Florence as an example, right, because it was such a catastrophic event for the island. But leading up to the evacuation, public safety was going around at the very end, with with the PA system, just to communicate that and make sure that we knew at the end, the last boat off, that we had 7 people that said they weren't going to leave. And to Leslie's point, we can't necessarily make you leave, but
Leaving, it's just like get trapped.
right,
Like last September, we had the floods unexpected.
right.
And I will say that with the new cell tower, a lot of the carriers that are on that tower have also upgraded their equipment with that. Yes, recently with that. They obviously have the generators, and if for some reason they cannot get people over here to make sure those generators are running and staying refueled, we do have access to be able to fill those for them in the event that we need to do that because they can't get here. So hopefully,
Cell tower should be up and running.
yeah, hopefully with
Now,
the upgraded systems.
your service that you have during great weather will be the max service that you have during a storm as well. So like you were saying, some companies have upgraded, some have not on the tower. So
It's good to know, in the past, that's been an issue. Thank you, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
all right, and if you choose to stay, and Leslie hit this really, really well, get to a safest area in your house, which is the middle, away from windows. And so I don't really think we need to go into that much more.
Can I just go back and add one more point with the internet system, that the broadband fiber system, most everybody's on what they call a node. And the nodes have a certain battery power lifetime if the power goes out, which is somewhere in the neighborhood of 6 to 8 hours. So once that node goes out, you will lose internet service. Notwithstanding, if you still have your cell phone, you still have cellular service that you could get on the internet with. Okay. All right.
Chris.
Yeah, how does the tram system work, and a mandatory? I mean, do we still have to go sign up and buy a ticket and go through that stuff? How does that work?
So we actually have a meeting, we're scheduling a meeting with ourselves, because as we all know, there's the ticket system's fairly new now of how they're doing that. In fact, I just got my first online ticket today. So we have a meeting scheduled. We're pinning down the date and time, but we're with ourselves, Audit Unlimited, Brunswick County Emergency Management, and Southport Police, because they'll be dealing with all of our vehicle traffic once we send everybody over there. So we're gonna meet and discuss those exact same things. So when this occurs, are reservations a thing, which I would imagine not?
Right.
And how all that process will play out.
And how do they know to pick us up?
Right.
Yeah, in the past, through a voluntary evacuation order, they pretty much stayed on schedule because it's been so far in advance. And then by the time we get to the mandatory, the numbers are much smaller. But again, I think that's an excellent question that we will certainly follow up with when we meet with transportation.
And you were later.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
I think that's it for that one. So recovery is a gradual process. And what that means is we have to have time initially, especially if it's a mandatory and a storm where we have to leave. That means we have to get back. We're gonna have to do assessments. That starts with just village personnel, the EOC, so the public safety and utilities, and what's your other division? Public Works. Guys will be out doing the road assessments, clearing trees. That's the first part of it. Then the second part we allow more people to come in as far as, what's that next group we talked about, who comes in after us? The businesses to establish, especially the restaurants, they have to do a whole lot of inspections to be able to get back into compliance with their, the 98, 99 health inspection code or scores. And so they'll need time to process that. And that basically gives them the ability to come to the island. They have to stay on premise to get that there and then leave the island. The next step would be certain other, but there's a very tiered system for reentry. And that system, again, that information will come from our PIO when it's time for you to be able to come back. And we monitor that system. We have part of our plan for storms is not only when we come back do we have officers over here, but we also stage officers at D Point to deal with any issues there as well. We have a mutual aid agreement with Southport Police Department, so we have full powers of everything. And we send officers over there at D Point to assist and let you know, and they're gonna be knowledgeable as well, because we're gonna give them all the same information of these are the people who can, these are the people who can't, and this is why. That way they can relay that information to you on at D Point side as well. Yeah, okay, and
I'm gonna add, it's really important. I mean, the weather can be really nice after the storm and you do want to explore, you do want to see how everybody fared. But when we're getting there and trying to clear the roads and do the assessments of the properties that we have to do, which need to be turned in a timely manner, we need you off the roads. You impede us and our progress on getting everybody back to normal after a storm.
and one thing I will mention is we have limited staff.
Thank you.
We don't have, we can't just, like in the mainland, you can say, hey, the storm hit Brunswick County really hard, but it didn't hit New Hanover County. Well, we're gonna have New Hanover County come down for a couple hours. Kind of more difficult for us to be able to do that. So after that storm, when we are trying to clear roads and do everything, what we've experienced in the past is sometimes people will start calling in and saying, well, I can't get out because of the flooded roads, but I need to make the ferry at such and such time. But unfortunately, we can't be a private taxi service. We have other responsibilities that we have going on.
I think one of the lessons learned when we came out of PTCA was that perhaps we should have regulated the contractor ICE vehicle movement across the island for those first 4 or 5 days as we were responding to the flooding. That was a big contributing factor that was hampering our response and recovery process. So.
So, when you guys email us, or do we have to constantly keep looking at your website?
No, ma'am. Like I said, when we want you to do something, even when we want you to come back, you're gonna get a code red.
Oh, read the same.
Yep,
Thank you.
yep. We'll make that very clear because we'll probably be flooded with inquiries about when we can come back. So we'd be gladly to tell you when you can.
Stephen, you want to talk about damage assessment?
Another question.
I don't know if you want to talk about now, Josh, or that we should probably talk about on Thursday, but you just mentioned limited number of resources. You do still have a number of individuals here that are full-time homeowners that are part of public safety. You can use us.
And we have in the,
State about it.
yep, and we have in the past, the ones who stay.
Not necessarily staying, but I mean, if you just talk about that phased in as far as getting here, private trucks or anything like that.
Correct. And the ones who are certified to drive trucks, just so everyone's aware. We have used volunteers for different storms in the past. And what that would include is you would fall under public safety in that reentry. Because you'll be coming to help us. You may not be able to go stay at your house. You'd have to be like a part of our crew and stay here. But yes, we have used certain volunteers with their individual credentials. So like we're probably not gonna need rehab. But if you're a certified driver for an engine, come on, we're probably gonna need you, like that kind of thing.
Maybe call to talk about that Thursday.
Your point, do we still have the disaster assessment team?
Yes, we're going to cover some of that and we have Q&A at the end. So let us get through the rest of our slides so we can kind of, yeah.
Yeah, part of the after action for the village is we do have a volunteer group of damage assessment team. They're one of the first ones to come back after staff. Their first task is to go to their gridded system that they're responsible for and report back to me if there's any roads that are impassable due to flooding or trees. That's their first things. We want to try and assess these roads as quick as possible. So public safety, public works, and all those guys know where they can and can't go and where they are needed to open up roads. After that, they do a windshield survey, which is not really a windshield here because generally you're still gonna have to get out and kind of walk around. But the important thing to note of that is that this is just a quick assessment to see if, say, windows are blown out, roofs are damaged, tree on the house, that kind of thing that you can quickly assess exterior. And they're gonna kind of give a quick rough estimate on what the damage cost is so that we can tally all that up and report that to the county because that helps for damage declarations and what kind of support we need. And we try and get those figures as quick as possible so that local, state, and county folks can start making those wheels start to turn so we can get folks here when we need them. That's pretty much the first thing that we do with our damage assessment is to get the roads assessed and then your houses as quickly as possible. If you want something more substantial and you're not gonna be able to make it back to your house for a while, once we start having more folks onto the island, whether it be your property managers or a contractor, they're gonna be the ones that are gonna give you a real detailed assessment on your property when they can access the island. The main impacts that we're gonna have on the island are gonna be flooding issues. Your houses here are pretty well designed for wind. We typically don't have many problems with wind. It's really the flooding and the nuisance flooding that we have. We had a pretty good at one of the council meetings, our hydraulic person talked about the hydrology of the island. And really, if you know you're in a place where the elevation is 5 foot above sea level, those are the areas that we experience the flooding. It's groundwater typically pushing up. You could have some stormwater that pushed in that's going to hang around. So anything that you'd have in your garages, below your house for storage, your golf carts, those kinds of things, before we know we're going to get the rains and the flooding, if you can move those things to higher elevations, a lot of folks know some areas that they can move their carts. Do that because your garages and your areas under your house should be designed to handle the flooding. The water's going to come in, eventually it'll go out, and nothing really should be damaged outside of some cleanup from water standing and that kind of thing. The important thing to note is that the ponding, until that water table goes back to its normal level, that the ponding is going to remain. The village has a pretty good stormwater system to try and get that water table lowered, but it does take time. And depending on how high the water table has risen, will determine how long that needs to take to get that back down. In the past, there has been some private pumps set up at residences to try and pump it to areas. Going forward, that's not something that is going to be allowed. 2 reasons. One, it's hard for us to try and maintain where those are being set up if they're being pumped somewhere that's not causing more of a nuisance or a problem for a neighboring property. And it's really not that effective because as soon as you shut the pump off, the water rises right back up. You're really mostly circulating the water because, like we said, it's the groundwater coming up. Our system is approved through CAMA to be able to discharge the water, so it meets CAMA and FEMA regulations. So we're doing it in a way that the state is also happy with, where some of the private folks would not be doing it in that way.
Okay, want to talk about debris. There's been some storms, Florence in particular, where it generated a lot of construction debris after the homes had sat for weeks without power. The humidity and the water fostered an environment of mold, and so there was a lot of debris from like drywall that was pulled out and whatnot. And so we, the village, we have to figure out a way to get that debris off the island. In addition to vegetative debris, as I mentioned with Isaias, there was a tornado that cut through part of Middle Island and it did a substantial damage to the trees, tree canopy, and created a lot of vegetation debris. It's so much debris to the extent that we, the village and our public works folks cannot manage that internally. We don't have the manpower and the equipment and personnel to do that. But we have in place what are known as FEMA pre-debris disaster contracts. So for those larger events, we just activate those contracts. They're ready to go. We pick up the phone and we call the contractor and they mobilize to the island. If we do that, Karen will be sending out pamphlets, flyers that show that the steps in that process and what you do with your vegetative debris, that you get it out to the edge of the road. Hopefully don't place it on top of any cable box or power or meter. So when the contractor goes to grab it, they don't damage any of that. We need a little bit of time too. We need to provide a little bit of time after the storm for you as the property owners to get that debris to the edge of the road. So it typically will include an initial pass to pick up the debris, and then we might wait 2-3 weeks more or less when we do a second and final pass. But the ultimate goal is to get all that debris. And with vegetative debris in particular, the contractor will take it to a disposal site where they'll grind and turn it into mulch. And we'll use it. We use that, as we know, around the island. Mulch is a commodity on the island. And then with the C&D debris, we actually get that off island by way of the barge. The contractor hauls all that off. And so sometimes those debris management efforts will last for months. I think with Florence, we went from October through February in getting all that debris off the island. And so those debris contracts, again, are FEMA approved and acceptable for public assistance reimbursement, which I'll get into in a little bit in a few slides. The only other contract we do have is sand sifting. If the particular event is one that produces a lot of storm surge and pushes the frontal dunes over on top of public roads, that's where we would come in and remove that sand so that you can open the road back up. So the contractor would sift that sand and place it back out on the beach. But in all the years, we've never had to activate the sand contract, just the vegetative debris and the C&D. All right. Next, I'll turn it over to JP McCann, our Public Services Director, who oversees our utilities, our wastewater, water and sewer systems.
Thank you, Chris. I'd just like to start with saying that the utilities decisions are compliance driven. They're protocols that are dictated by state statute and administrative code. So we have to closely adhere to what the state is, requiring us to do. And that includes all the staff for David that's out in the field, working this past time through PTC 8. We had to go out and manually control the wastewater system. What I mean by that is we had to go out and control the lift stations and the grinder pumps manually because the power never did go out. So the only way we could control wastewater flows to the plant was by controlling what came into the plant. And the first point of access for us is the grinder pumps and the lift stations. So as it might look too, as the storm's clearing and water levels are coming down, the water only travels subsurface on the island ever so quickly. So when we have water issues in one area, it might take time for water in the high dune ridge to make it down to the low areas. And we have no control over the speed of how that water moves. What we do need to do is compensate it when it does get to the low areas because it affects our lift stations and grinder pumps. So at the peak of the PTC 8, we had 850,000 gallons a day coming through the wastewater plant, which is a tremendous amount of water when we regulate at 300,000 gallons per day. With peaking and how that plant was built, we were able to keep up with that flow. And we partially treated the wastewater, mostly because it was mostly rainwater coming through the system. But the I&I, which we call infiltration inflow, is critical that we control that because it's state law that dictates what we do. So please have patience, especially on the recovery side, because what you might see visually might not be actually what's happening at the plant. And everything is driven by the wastewater plant.
And I'd also like to add, houses that have generators, if your septic system is having to be shut down due to the flooded lift station or your grinder pump, even if your house has power because you have a generator, you're still not gonna be allowed to occupy it because you won't have sewer.
And our next steps are both from the Florence Task Force that identified different things that need to be done to grinder pumps. We've also done some research with PTC8 and realized that we need to do some more work. And what I'm talking about is taking the old low pressure concrete tanks that have been used. There's still about 45 of them out there. Those have to be converted to regular fiberglass sealed wet wells. What I mean by that is we've identified a new wet well system to use for all the homes on the island. But what they do is those concrete old low pressure tanks aren't be able to be sealed off from this I&I, this water that just infiltrates in. So what we have to do is we have to eliminate those. We do have a plan for that. It is being worked into the budget to replace those. The quick work that we've been doing recently is 80 or so tanks that have had extensions put on them with snorkels. And what this will enable us to do is help control the flows better. It's not going to eliminate all the I&I or all the infiltration, but it's going to cut it down. So if anybody has any questions about that, you have a property related to that, you can call me anytime. I'd love to come out and talk to you, have that discussion, just so you understand. But we do have about 45 old concrete tanks that the wet wells need to be replaced. And those are at cost about $5,000 per unit, but those are going to be covered through our enterprise fund. But it's just, that takes time to do that. So I just want to put that out there. And Karen has been putting addresses out there about the ones that were impacted. We're also going to contact those 45 or so homeowners that have the old concrete tanks in the very near future to have these conversations so you know what's going on.
All right, thanks. Next slide. So looking at post-storm decision-making, that's after the storm has come through. And we talk about, safety is of the utmost priority when we make our decisions. When we talk about a reentry system, you'll hear me mention to the maximum extent practical and safe. When Hurricane Florence hit, that was that mandatory evacuation. And we learned a lot of lessons from that in terms of the phased reentry process that by way of the task force culminated in recommendations to help guide the emergency operations team and the mayor and council in that process. And so it's a tiered process of reentry that also requires coordination with Bald Head Island Transportation again. Because, if the river's still closed and they can't run the ferries, or with PTC8 for a period of time, even their staff were impacted due to the flooding of the roads on the mainland, cutting off access to Southport. So there's other variables that we have to take into consideration. But in general, the tiered system for reentry with phase one after the emergency operations team has considered the island to be safe for that initial reentry of certain businesses. And there's really two specific businesses, the market and the hardware store, that we have coordinated with for assistance, whether it's food supplies, water, ice for the response team, or the hardware store for materials that we might need, that they're helpful to the operations. The second part of the tiered system is the reestablishment of the on-island food services. As Josh had mentioned, we want to make sure that when we do reopen the island, that those are ready to go, that they've gotten their proper health inspections off and they're ready to go to receive folks. And then the third would be with individuals with primary residence on the island. And with that, for any prolonged emergency evacuation, that those considerations for that reentry by the EOC could be, as an example, a geographical scenario where a phased approach for on one day, one period of time for properties from Muscadine to the west, and then followed with properties from Muscadine to the east. But again, you know, with all of these events, there is an obvious need that we have to adapt and be flexible depending on how these events unfold. And so some of these decisions are not, we can't necessarily put them verbatim in what we're going to do on paper in a plan per se. It's more of a general guidance. Some of those decisions will occur specific to the event. So,
Hey, Chris.
yeah.
And it didn't get put in the notes, but another important thing to remember is even when you are allowed to re-enter, more than likely, we will still be in a state of emergency. So any of those conditions that the office of the mayor has put out in that proclamation still apply. So even if you are allowed to come back onto the island, if there's a curfew or there's a mandate that you stay on your property, you still have to abide by that.
Yeah. Okay, Stephen, you want to go over insurance and contractors?
Yeah, insurance, obviously, after an event, it's stressful. You've got a lot of emotions going on with dealing with seeing your house and your belongings possibly damaged. Kind of like was mentioned earlier, one of the key things you can do now is kind of catalog the stuff that you have. Take a lot of photos, so you have documents. It's important after the event to not rush to try and get things repaired until after you talk with your insurance and whether or not they need to send out an adjuster to look at things. Obviously, if you've got a tree on it, they want you to get the tree off. If you've got a window blown out, get that cleaned up and put something over that so the house is not further damaged after the event. But really after that, you've got to kind of slow down and work with your insurance to make sure that you're going to do things that are going to get covered by your insurance and you're not going to be left doing something that would keep you from being able to get the full coverage afforded by your insurance company. Keep that insurance information somewhere with you if you have to evacuate, so you know who to contact and how to start that ball rolling. But like I said, one of the key things is to not get too far out ahead of your insurance in their process. As frustrating as it may be to have to kind of wait on them, but it's important. Like I said, do the safe things to make sure you're not getting further damage to your house. But after that, make sure that you've gone through their channels and are doing things the way they want them done. Contractors, there's some pretty good information on you know what kinds of things contractors need to be doing after a big event. There will be, we call them storm chasers. There'll be groups that come in to try and help do the cleanup and come in and start to get places put back to normal. Some of them are good contractors. They're ethical. They're there to actually do a good job and do things right. A lot of them are not. The important thing to note is they still need to be licensed in North Carolina. A lot of them are not. This kind of goes along same with the insurance. While you may want to get things done as quick as possible, dealing with somebody who's out of state, doesn't have a presence on the island, try your best to vet them and make sure that they're going to do a job that they would stand behind and they're not just going to be gone 2 months later and they've left you with substandard products and your house is in bad shape and they're gone and there's really no repercussions. We will do our best to try and make sure they're getting permits and they're licensed in North Carolina. But it can be difficult sometimes to know which ones are here trying to do things the right way and which ones are not. So once again, it's not always best to get it done as fast as possible. As frustrating as that can be, but having somebody that is local and has, you know, a good reputation to stand behind can be a good thing if possible.
Okay. I want to touch upon, with FEMA on two assistance programs. First is the Public Assistance Program. And I know the title of it, would lend to believe it's, when you talk about the public, it's you all as property owners, but it's really geared towards the local government as a whole. And the Public Assistance Program provides reimbursement for monies expended for the town to undertake all of from pre-storm actions and getting ready for the storm through our response and our recovery. And so there's different categories that you see, A through G. Category B, emergency protective measures, are those things that we do leading up to the storm, as an example. And then the next slide is the FEMA individual assistance. And this is the program for property owners that may provide some benefits to property owners that if needed, for which insurance may not cover. And then the next slide. So a little bit just to touch on the hazard mitigation program. These are things that FEMA would fund to increase your resiliency of your property on the island, whether it's elevating the home or buying out repetitive flood loss properties, or hardening the infrastructure. And I'll be honest, some of these things may not be available for us on Bald Head just by the nature of our socioeconomic status. So but it's there. And then on lessons learned, I think throughout the course of our presentations that we've emphasized a lot, particularly in terms of safety, and that while we pre-plan as best we can, we have to adapt and be flexible. But know that after every event, we have what we call an after-action review, where the EOC team gets together and reviews, how did we fare through the event? What did we do well? What maybe did we not do well? What can we improve upon? For example, with stormwater management and the I&I infiltration with the grinder pumps and things like that we're already, working on improving. And we're working on other long-term comprehensive planning efforts with stormwater and the local assistance to stormwater infrastructure. It's a grant that we got from the state to help out with that or other long-term improvements. And so with that, we've been right at almost 2 hours. And I appreciate those that have stuck with us here. Thank you. And now perhaps maybe want to open it up for any questions that you might have with the panel. So Tom, you want to?
I got two. One, granted the DC stormwater will be good. I don't know the politics behind everything, but in preparation, let's look at Cologne, regarding lagoons, lowering the lagoons as far as, eventually then end up putting some standing water through pumping back in.
Yeah, so
Question one, and then question two, I've heard the term mentioned, I think it has to do with stormwater as far as your house has been condemned, temporarily. If you could expound what that actually means.
So I'll take number one, and again, the specific events of PTC8 that leading up to the massive rainfall amounts that the island was in, the lagoon levels, water levels were actually very low, to the extent that any proactive release of lagoon water through the bypass lagoon out to Bald Head Creek, the water was only an inch over the seal. So even, there wasn't a whole lot of water on the island. And so, but in other events, we're certainly like, our public services, JP and his folks are always coordinated with the Bald Head Island Club superintendent and monitoring those lagoon levels. And if there are periods of time, like I know right now, we've been getting a fair amount of rain. And so that might be a point where, the level of the lagoons, and if a storm's approaching, we're proactively letting water off the island. So there is that, we're managing that. Okay. As far as the second question and condemnation, Stephen or JP, I might turn to you all.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes down to if we've had to shut your sewer off either because your lift pump's line infiltration or the lift station that kind of for that whole area just can't handle the amount of stormwater infiltration that's getting in there. If you don't have sewer, then you can't occupy the structure. That's just through building code and state statute that you have to have a sanitary way to remove all those things from the structure. And if we can't do that, then we can't have people occupying it.
How many lift stations do we have?
39,
39.
not counting individual grinder pumps that act as individual lift stations, like Southern Living area. A lot of those have a home run back to the plant. So there's a little discussion there. If you'd like to talk more about it, I'm available anytime.
And that would then change. So how we talked about earlier of we can't force you to leave. Well, that would change that. Then we, if it's been condemned or even for a certain period of time, you gotta go. And then we would have the ability to say, no, you're leaving.
Yes, Gail.
If a grinder pump is not working and it shuts down the individual sewer system to a home, that home is condemned, is in theory, and people cannot live there, where they're supposed to go.
I think to Leslie's question about having that backup plan that to relocate off somewhere on the mainland until that system.
Are we gonna have these shelters here?
We do not have a shelter on the island.
Can we not have a shelter here?
I don't know where we would put it.
We'll have
Yeah,
staff to do
I
that.
mean, look,
Who's gonna give up
and
the property?
historically and in theory, Bald Head Island residents have options, right? Most part,
Everybody.
right? I would say, I mean,
To Leslie's point,
It's for the main, I think what you mean by options is maybe means to
If
do
we,
something.
yes, go ahead, yeah.
if we have been caught off unawares
Right,
and we're here, the river's closed, the ferry system's not working. So on, and all of that, which we have had happen.
Right.
And then you condemn somebody's house and they can't stay there. What is their option?
yeah, I mean, and that was what occurred with PTC 8 and that's why, there wasn't a decision to strictly enforce that per se. Right? I mean, we were locked in, so,
We just asked people to conserve water and not to flush if they didn't have to, but we didn't go beyond that. We just asked people not to use water and not to flush. We didn't go beyond that. We did it in PTC 8.
Yeah,
That's what Chris is saying.
yeah, so they didn't condemn them at that point in time. They just said conserve, and
do not
so
flush.
there's a distinction difference there. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a big difference.
Yeah, but any long-term, and again, every event is unique, right? And, I mean, the question's been posed, what if we were stranded on this island for a week or more? What would we do? And I've talked with the chief and trying to, and maybe talking with the county and getting with New Hanover County Emergency Management about some plan of action where we could literally in the National Guard, that we could literally evacuate people up East Beach to Fort Fisher, to Curry Beach and Carolina Beach to get them on the mainland.
There were 130-some homes that were caught, so to speak. That's a lot of people.
Yeah. But, you know, those are, that's,
I think
one thing that's important is, you know, when you were saying, well, we made an exception in PTCA. That should not ever be taken as, oh, yeah, it might happen and they'll probably let us go. When you're talking about preparedness for a storm or some event, you know, today it's not too soon to talk to some of your neighbors. So look, I live in a low-lying area. Hope this never happens, but I might need to evacuate over to some other part of the island. You know, you can't be depending on leniency when it comes to condemning, you know, a structure.
yeah, that's good.
And we have methods available to us already, as far as if we had to evacuate people that were stranded, the river club. I mean, we're fortunate enough that we live in an area that has a National Guard base right down the road with vehicles that's made to go through deserts and everything else. They'll be able to. So
If they actually had to leave their house, which at this point we're saying they just have to be responsible using their system.
Well, that's gonna depend on each storm. PTCA was a little different. I don't think that's the model that we're gonna go forward with, that we don't want you to use water and flush. We're gonna still hope that we've got you out of here before we have that situation.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you know, PTCA and Florence, completely different scenarios, where Florence, we had time to evacuate.
If we had a PTCA now, after all this rain we've had, it'd be a whole nother level.
well, but since then, they've also done, because part of the issue of where some of those houses, we had to shut down the sewer. They've addressed that with the snorkels and the extensions and everything, so.
Yeah.
And as that process continues, the chances of that happening will get less and less and less.
Yeah, because
That's what I'm trying to find out, if people get in a bind in a situation like that, which it is totally conceivable it can happen.
Right.
What is our backup?
we're gonna have to figure that out.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, we'll have to-
People ask that.
Right, no, I understand, yeah.
That's what I mean.
Yeah, I think we as local government, first responders, that, you know, the mission is at times to figure it out, right?
Right,
And
it's fair.
yeah,
I know Red Cross does a lot of help and things like that, and it's just, you know.
But in that situation,
To figure it out.
right, in that situation, how would Red Cross be available to get here?
Stay over here with you, John.
But no, I'm talking about, if the river shut down, how they gonna get here?
right. Yeah, I mean,
To that.
yeah, it's, you know, throughout these events, the EOC team, and including the mayor, who's familiar with having dealt with PTCA, you know, and how the hundreds of decisions that we had to make throughout that course of that event, and to the extent one of those decisions almost culminated in having to do an evacuation. I mean, we were on the border of losing our wastewater treatment plant. And, right, yeah, right. So it's, yeah.
Thank you.
Anybody else have any?
Just a general comment. So when we're talking about preparedness and deciding to evacuate, deciding not to evacuate, there hasn't been, you know, as long as I've been alive, you watch the news, every time there's a disaster, there's some public safety people risking their life because somebody made the decision that they wanted to stick in their house. And so if you hear any conversation about, oh yeah, the storm's coming, I'm not leaving, it's like you just have to talk to them, because the idea, money aside, you know, if you have somebody risking their life because somebody is making a stubborn decision, we shouldn't be
I
doing
couldn't
that.
hear all you said, but we love Josh and his team, so you know.
And I don't wanna have to go to knock on somebody's family's door.
No, and you know what? They don't want you to.
All right, well, wow, hopefully this has been great for those of you have stuck it out with us, and like I said, we've recorded it and we'll be making it available for anybody who's interested to learn more about what we do and how, what our partners with the National Weather Service and with the county. So thank you. Have a good rest of your day. All right.